Welcome to the first installment of Faint Footsteps World War II. In Part 1, we get our feet wet together as I share a brief outline of my father's wartime experience. My father, Doug Harrison, enlisted in the Royal Canadian Navy Volunteer Reserve in Hamilton, Ontario, in June 1941. After several weeks of probationary training, he moved on to more rigorous activities at HMCS Star in Halifax. He wrote the following about the two bases. Hamilton was tough, but it couldn't hold a candle to Halifax. A few years ago, when asked what my father did during the war, I said he joined the Merchant Marine, patrolled the Atlantic Ocean, and transported valuable cargoes of troops, food supplies, and materials of war to England in merchant ships. I was more wrong than right. My first impressions were formed by an article he wrote in the 1990s entitled Merchant Mariner, True Norwich Hero. He said, Norwich has its pioneers and its heroes. One of the heroes is Skimp Smith, a wireless operator once attached to the United States Merchant Marine during the Second World War. After a lengthy conversation with Skimp, Dad declared he was going to join the Navy. I would curse Skimp later many times, he writes, but on that day the die was cast. It was to be navy blue for me. He enlisted in Hamilton shortly thereafter. I assumed he followed in Skimp's footsteps. In 2010, 7 years after my father died, I motorcycled to Halifax and buried him at sea, as he desired. I was none the wiser about his World War II actions, and when I tossed a small ship containing his ashes into the Atlantic Ocean, the words on a plaque read, Leading Seaman, Canadian Merchant Marine. Yes, still way off base. On that day in June 2010, I was 2 feet from the ocean, where my father had served in the Merchant Marine. So I thought. I was actually 4,000 kilometers from the first combined operations training camps in England and Scotland, where my father and about 100 of his mates learned how to handle landing crafts voluntarily beginning in February 1942. I was even further from Dieppe, where many Canadian sailors, volunteers in combined operations, saw their first action. I was farther still from the shores of North Africa, Sicily, and Italy, the places where, eventually, up to 400 Canadians in combined ops manned landing crafts during Allied raids and invasions in 1942 and 1943. When I buried my father at sea on the East Coast, I was unaware that he finished his World War II service on the West Coast in 1945 at a combined ops training camp on Vancouver Island. He knew the camp as Givenchy III, the Spit, and Coward's Cove. He said that he trained zombies on Navy cutters and played a lot of baseball. My knowledge of this was way out in left field. That being said, since discovering his handwritten Navy memoirs in 2011, along with several more articles from his hometown newspaper, I have learned much more about the trail he took during World War II. I found this 1931 photograph of the Spit at the Comox Library in 2015. I found this story by my father in a very rare book and learned that during an important exercise near Troon, Scotland, he was ordered off a landing craft when it got stuck on a sandbar. After he helped get the craft moving again, he was left behind in chest-deep water. Dad was one cold sailor when he was eventually rescued later that night. I have located many other stories and photos as well. I now know he loved ships as a very young child. He lost close mates at Dieppe, and he lived in a cave in Sicily. I've learned he had a few favorite pubs in Scotland, and one of them is just down this road. I really like it too. My father was discharged from the Canadian Navy in September 1945, one day before his 25th birthday. He declined the call to participate in the Pacific Theater of War, along with 5 of his close mates. and I know some dark shadows cast during World War II followed him and some of his mates for a very long time. My father wrote the following in his notes. It would cost a small fortune today to retrace the places I had gone to and seen under the white ensign. And it's true. The cost of trips I've taken to Halifax, Scotland, London, England, and Vancouver Island would surely make my father roll his eyes. But they've been worth every penny. More stories will follow.